Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of Learning with Leary, presented by TheFloatLife. I'm Jake Leary, and this is how I teach people how to ride a one-wheel for the first time. If you want the one-wheel to balance you, you've got to put it on the ground and turn it on without stepping on it or touching the sensor pad. You'll need to know which foot you want in front, and if you don't know, just imagine that you want to run and slide down a slippery floor wearing socks. Which foot would you put in front? You can always tell which is the front of the board because the front is lighter than the rear is heavier and will always go down to the ground, and the front will be up in the air. So this is just a foot pad, but this foot pad knows if you're standing on it. It has 2 weight sensors, one here and one here. And if you watch the blue lights on the Pint, you can see the board knows if you're standing on one or the other or both of them at the same time. To start the motor, you have to have your weight on both at the same time. If you step on like this, the board won't turn on. If you don't get your heel pushing down on the pad, the board won't turn on. But if you have weight on both halves, the motor will turn on once the board gets to a level height, and once it's on, it'll start balancing you. Now, everything I just said about keeping weight on both halves only applies when you're going less than 1 mile an hour. If you're riding at speed, your foot can be anywhere on that foot pad. So don't worry, the board will not shut off or drop you at speed if your foot comes half off the sensor. When you get under 1 mile per hour, then the motor shuts off if your weight is only on half. So if you want to turn the motor off and dismount the board, you can come to a complete stop, meaning you stay totally balanced, take weight off one sensor pad, and the motor will shut off. And that's pretty much it for the electronics. Everything else now is just balance and how you interact with the board. The balance is counterintuitive because you look at the one wheel and you're mainly worried about balancing between your left and your right foot. But in reality, it's the exact opposite. The one wheel will balance you between your left and your right foot. If you lean in one direction, the board will go that way and balance you out. Toe to heel balance, however, is all you at all times. One of the most important ingredients of balance is confidence. If you don't have board sport experience, it can really help to set up a balance board to help get a feel for this toe to heel balance. The balance board looks, feels, and is less dangerous than a one wheel. And the more danger you feel, the less balance you have. So if you're nervous about learning the one wheel, take some time to practice on a balance board and you'll pick up the one wheel almost instantly. Balance requires focus. And if you're thinking about anything besides what you're doing, it's going to make learning to ride a lot harder, especially if there are cars or people or obstacles to worry about. So find a nice wide open area and make sure you have all the protective gear you need to feel safe. Before you start riding at speed, it'll really help your confidence if you're familiar with stopping and dismounting the board. Slowing down and tipping the board over is totally fine. It's not super smooth, but it's safe. In an emergency dismount, like if the board starts wobbling, you lose your balance, you need to jump off with both feet. Now, this right here is maybe the most important part of the video because I know from experience, it's not enough to simply tell new riders that they need to jump off with both feet. They'll still try and step off with one foot every single time. So I always show new riders what happens. Because if you try and step off with one foot and you leave your foot on the weight sensor, the board is going to think that you're still on it and that you're trying to accelerate at full speed. So again, if you start to lose balance or confidence, just jump clean off as soon as possible and with both feet. And that brings us to the Control Dismount, the elegant dismount, the heel lift. You come to a stop, meaning you try and stay totally balanced in all directions and peel your heel off of the sensor pad. I really recommend practicing this a bunch of times before you start riding at speed. The main thing people mess up here is that they think, oh, I know how to lift my heel. I'll just lift my whole leg up and put all my weight into this leg. But then they start moving, and since they're moving more than 1 mile an hour, the motor doesn't shut off. When you want to stay in place, you do need to balance between your left and your right leg, so you need to keep the weight even between your two legs. So when you're peeling your heel up, the weight that you take off of that heel needs to go into the toes of that same foot. And in order to keep the board from tipping over towards the toe side, on your other foot, you want to shift weight from the toes to the heels. When you do the heel lift correctly, you'll feel a click of the motor turning off, and then the board is free to lower to the ground. If this sounds like a lot of prep, it is, and you can totally substitute all of this prep with falling down and learning the hard way. But I teach about 50 people a year how to ride, and it's been over 2 years since anyone has fallen down. So I really do believe in this method, and when they're finally ready to get on the board, I give them an arm that they can grab onto for balance. I don't recommend holding on to them unless they're a small child who you can lift up off the ground easily. In general, it's not confidence inspiring for the rider to feel like they're stuck to you because you're grabbing onto them, and they're probably going to be more comfortable if they feel like they can separate from you whenever they need to. A rider with board sport experience will usually hold my arm for about 5 seconds before they can go off on their own. New riders may hold on for closer to 5 minutes, and during this time, I like to make sure that they can turn toe side and heel side. Turning on a Onewheel basically feels like magic. You just lean towards your toes or your heels, and you will turn in that direction. When the rider is ready to let go, I'll follow very closely at first and remind them that I'm still there if they start wobbling, and then slowly back off and let them do their thing. At this point, I make sure that they know how to slow down and come to a stop without me helping them. And I warn them about pushback. Like I said, I've taught over 100 people how to ride, and every single person, even those with 0 board experience, have been able to ride around on their own with just about 5 minutes of instruction and about 5 minutes of holding on to me. The board will feel wobbly at first, which is why it's important to lend an arm for balance. But just like riding a bike, it's easier to balance when you pick up a little speed, and once you get the confidence to pick up that speed, the Onewheel feels really intuitive. One final note on the Onewheel Pint: the shape of the tire makes it harder to balance, but it has a feature called Simple Stop, which you can turn on or off from your phone, which makes it easier to learn because you can just roll backwards to turn the board off instead of doing the heel lift. So overall, neither the Pint nor the XR is easier to learn on. The tire shape makes the XR easier, but the Simple Stop feature makes the Pint easier. That's it for this week's episode. Thanks for watching, everybody, and until next time, float on, my friends.
You stoked to go ride? I'm stoked to go ride. I'm gonna go ride. You should too. But if you're not, definitely subscribe to our channel or check out one of these 2 videos. I'm gonna go get my shred on.